Maya stood in the corner of the briefing room watching the other crew members gather around the holographic display. The interstellar research vessel Horizon's Edge hummed quietly around them as Captain Rex pointed to the swirling storms on the planet below. Korth 7 looked angry from space with its blood-red atmosphere and crackling lightning that never stopped. Maya had studied the files for weeks, but seeing it in person made her stomach twist with both fear and excitement. The mission was simple in theory, but deadly in practice. They needed to study the predatory creatures that lived on Korth 7's surface and bring back biological samples for the Science Council. The planet was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most dangerous worlds ever discovered. Every creature there had evolved to kill, and the environment itself seemed designed to destroy visitors. Maya looked around at her teammates and felt smaller than usual. At barely 5 feet tall with thin arms and legs, she looked like a child next to the others. The Brutani warriors were massive with 4 arms each and skin like armor plating. Their leader Korvac stood nearly 8 feet tall and could probably crush Maya's head with one hand. The human marines were not as big as the Brutani, but they were still giants compared to her with muscles. Built from years of combat training, even the other scientists made Maya feel weak. Dr. Tom was a veteran explorer who had survived dozens of dangerous missions. His arms were covered in scars from close encounters with alien predators, and his calm confidence made everyone feel safer. The ship's medical officer was a Korathi female whose 6 legs and natural armor made her look like a walking tank. Captain Rex activated another display showing a massive creature that made everyone in the room step back. The beast was 8 feet tall at the shoulder with thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. Its head was the size of a small vehicle with jaws that could bite through steel. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through rock. "This is our guide," Captain Rex said, pointing at the creature. "His name is Grim and he's a Thrackan. These creatures are the only reason anyone has ever survived more than a day on Korth 7's surface. Grim has been trained since birth to detect predators and navigate the hostile terrain. He weighs about 800 pounds and can carry supplies for the entire team." Maya stared at the image of Grim and felt a strange connection to the massive beast. Something in his eyes reminded her of the animals she had studied as a child. Back on Earth, despite his fearsome appearance, there was intelligence there and maybe even gentleness. Korvac loudly breaking Maya's concentration. "You cannot be serious about bringing the tiny human on this mission," he said, pointing one of his 4 arms at Maya. "She looks like she would break if someone breathed on her too hard. The first predator we encounter will swallow her whole without even noticing." Several other crew members nodded in agreement. Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment but forced herself to stand straighter. She had earned her place on this mission through years of study and fieldwork. Her knowledge of alien biology was better than anyone else on the ship. "Maya is our xenobiologist," Captain Rex said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We need her expertise to identify and catalog the creatures we encounter." "She can do that from orbit," Lieutenant Davis interrupted. The mission commander was a decorated veteran who had never lost a team member. "It's too dangerous to risk a civilian on the surface, especially one so ... He paused, looking for the right word. "Fragile," Korvac finished with another laugh. "That is the word you seek. Humans are weak creatures to begin with, but this one is weak even for a human. She will slow us down and get someone killed when we have to protect her." Maya felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She had heard comments like this her entire career. People looked at her small frame and quiet voice and assumed she was helpless. They never saw the determination that had carried her through years of dangerous research or the intelligence that had solved problems others could not. "I need to observe the creatures in their natural habitat," Maya said quietly. "Remote analysis cannot provide the behavioral data we need. I can handle myself in the field." Several crew members exchanged glances that clearly said they thought she was deluding herself. The Korathi medical officer clicked her mandibles in what Maya had learned was their version of disagreement. Even Tom, who had always been kind to her, looked worried about her safety. Captain Rex studied Maya for a long moment, then looked at the mission parameters on his display. The Science Council had specifically requested her expertise, and removing her from the ground team would require extensive paperwork and delays. Maya stays with the ground team, he decided, but she will remain in the protected center of our formation at all times. Maya wanted to argue that she was not some helpless child who needed constant protection, but she knew better than to push. Her luck, at least she would be on the surface where she could do real research instead of being stuck on the ship analyzing secondhand data. The briefing continued with discussions of equipment and safety protocols, but Maya barely listened. She was thinking about Grim and wondering if the massive creature was as gentle as he seemed in the pictures. Something told her that despite his fearsome appearance, the Thraken might understand what it felt like to be judged by others based on appearances. After the meeting ended, Maya returned to her quarters and stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked exactly like what she was, a small, quiet scientist who had never been in a real fight in her life. Her hands were soft from years of laboratory work, and her arms looked like twigs compared to the Marines. Maybe the others were right, and she had no business going on such a dangerous mission, but Maya had not become a xenobiologist to play it safe. She had dedicated her life to understanding alien creatures, and this was the opportunity of a lifetime. Korth-7's predators had never been studied up close, and the data she could gather might save countless lives on future missions. Outside her window, the storms of Korth-7 raged across the planet's surface. Lightning illuminated massive cloud formations that looked like angry faces glaring up at the ship. In a few hours they would descend into that hell, and Maya would finally get her chance to prove that size and strength were not the only things that mattered. She just hoped she would live long enough to show them all how wrong they were about her. The shuttle touched down on Korth-7's surface with a violent shudder that threw everyone against their restraints. Through the small windows, Maya could see a landscape that looked like something from a nightmare. Twisted metal trees reached toward a sky the color of dried blood, while strange creatures with too many eyes watched them from the shadows. The very air seemed to shimmer with heat and danger. Captain Rex opened the shuttle doors, and immediately the team felt the planet's crushing gravity slam into them like a physical blow. The Brutani warriors adapted quickly with their heavy bones and thick muscles, but the human Marines struggled to stay upright. Maya expected to be flattened by the increased weight, but found herself moving more easily than the others. Her smaller frame required less energy to function in the dense atmosphere. Grim emerged from his transport cage, and Maya got her first look at the massive Thraken in person. He was even more impressive than the pictures had suggested, with armor-like skin that gleamed in the red sunlight and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Despite his size and fearsome appearance, something about Grim reminded Maya of the gentle giants she had studied on other worlds. The team began their trek across the alien landscape, following scanner readings that indicated a pack of shadow cats in the nearby canyon system. These creatures were their primary target, massive predators that hunted in coordinated groups and had never been observed by living scientists. Maya carried her field equipment and tried to stay in the center of the formation as ordered, but she found herself drawn to Grim's steady presence. The Thraken moved with surprising grace for such a large creature. His thick legs absorbed the shock of each step, and his head swiveled constantly as he scanned for threats. Maya noticed that his nostrils flared every few seconds as he tested the air for scents that the team's electronic sensors could not detect. She began taking notes on his behavior patterns and realized that Grim was far more intelligent than anyone had given him credit for. When they stopped for their first rest, Maya approached Grim carefully. The massive creature watched her with curious eyes as she offered him some of her water ration. Most of the team members treated Grim like a piece of equipment, but Maya saw the intelligence behind his gaze and wanted to establish a connection. Grim accepted the water gratefully and allowed Maya to examine some old scars on his hide. She could tell stories from each mark, claw wounds from previous encounters with predators and burn marks from the planet's acidic rain. Despite all the pain he had endured, Grimm remained gentle and patient as Maya studied his anatomy. "You should not waste time playing with the beast," Korvac said dismissively. "It is a tool, nothing more. Save your energy for the real work ahead." Maya ignored the Brutani warrior and continued her observations. She was learning more about Korth-7's ecosystem from Grimm's behavior than all the sensor readings combined. The way he avoided certain areas told her about territorial boundaries, and his reaction to specific scents revealed information about predator movement patterns. Their first encounter with the Shadowcats came just before sunset when the team reached the edge of a rocky valley. Through her binoculars, Maya watched 6 sleek predators coordinate their hunt with precision that made her breath catch. Each creature was the size of an earth tiger, but moved like liquid shadow across the terrain. Their hunt was a masterpiece of strategy and teamwork that no human military unit could match. Maya began recording detailed observations about the pack's communication methods and hunting patterns. She noticed subtle body language cues that the others missed and started to understand how the creatures coordinated their attacks. When she tried to share her insights with Lieutenant Davis, he barely listened before dismissing her theories as speculation. Only Tom, the veteran scout, paid attention to Maya's observations. He had learned over the years that good intelligence could mean the difference between life and death on missions like this. While the others focused on their weapons and equipment, Tom watched Maya's careful analysis of the predators and began to see patterns he had missed. The team made camp in what their sensors indicated was a safe valley surrounded by natural barriers that should keep large predators away. Maya helped set up the defensive perimeter while watching Grimm's increasingly agitated behavior. The massive Thraken kept sniffing the air and turning his head toward the dark cliffs above their position. Maya tried to warn Lieutenant Davis that something was making Grimm nervous, but the mission commander was too busy reviewing tomorrow's planned route to pay attention to her concerns. The other team members were equally dismissive when she pointed out that their guide seemed to sense a threat their instruments could not detect. "The beast is probably just tired," Korvac said with his usual arrogance. "These creatures are not as intelligent as you humans pretend. It smells food cooking and wants to eat nothing more." But Maya knew better. She had been watching Grimm all day, and his current behavior was completely different from his earlier calm confidence. Something was wrong, and the Thrakens heightened. Senses were detecting a danger that remained hidden from the team's technology. That night, Maya volunteered for the middle watch, even though the others insisted she needed more rest than the combat-trained members. She sat beside Grimm and felt safer next to his massive bulk than she would have behind all their electronic warning systems. The Thraken seemed to appreciate her company and gradually relaxed as she gently cleaned some of his older wounds. As Maya worked, she realized that Grimm reminded her of herself in many ways. Everyone saw his size and assumed he was just a dangerous beast, but she could see the gentle intelligence in his eyes. Like her, he was constantly underestimated by those around him. The team treated him as equipment, while Maya recognized him as a valuable partner whose insights could save all their lives. Grimm allowed Maya to examine battle scars that told the story of his life on this hostile world. Some wounds were clearly defensive marks from protecting previous research teams from predators. Others seemed to be from territorial disputes with creatures even larger than himself. Through it all, Grimm had survived by being smart rather than just strong. During the quiet hours of her watch, Maya began to understand that Grimm was trying to communicate something important. His body language suggested they were being observed by something much more dangerous than the Shadowcats they had encountered earlier. The way he kept glancing toward the cliffs indicated a threat from above, while his nervous shuffling suggested whatever was watching them was patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike. Maya made detailed notes about Grimm's warnings and planned to present them to Lieutenant Davis in the morning. She had no way of knowing that by dawn their mysterious watcher would finally decide to act, and their mission would transform from scientific research into a desperate fight for survival. The attack came without warning on their third day as the team moved through a narrow canyon that their maps showed as the safest route to the research site. Maya was walking beside Grim when the massive Thraken suddenly stopped and raised his head with nostrils flaring. Before she could ask what was wrong, a shadow fell across the canyon walls and death descended from above. The Night Reaper was everything the legends claimed and worse. Standing 12 feet tall with midnight black skin that seemed to absorb light, the creature moved with impossible grace for something so massive. Its elongated head housed a brain that rivaled most sentient species, while its claws could tear through the team's armor like paper. This was not just a predator, but a thinking killer that had been studying them since their arrival. Lieutenant Davis shouted orders as the team scrambled for defensive positions, but the Night Reaper had chosen its battlefield perfectly. The narrow canyon walls prevented effective use of their heavy weapons, while the loose rocks underfoot made rapid movement treacherous. Within seconds, the creature's strategy became clear: divide the team and pick them off individually. The Night Reaper leaped from wall to wall with fluid movements that defied its size. Each landing sent showers of rocks down on the team below, while its piercing roars echoed off the canyon walls to create a disorienting wall of sound. The Brutani warriors tried to coordinate their response but found themselves separated as falling debris blocked their paths. Korvac charged forward with typical Brutani aggression, but the Night Reaper was ready for this reaction. The creature used the warrior's own momentum against him by dodging at the last second and sending Korvac crashing into the canyon wall. The impact left the proud Brutani stunned and bleeding, while the predator turned its attention to easier targets. The human Marines attempted to use their training to establish overlapping fields of fire, but the Night Reaper's intelligence allowed it to predict their tactics. It stayed in constant motion, using the terrain to break line of sight, while gradually herding the team members into isolated groups. Every time someone tried to reach a fallen comrade, the creature would appear to block their path. Maya found herself pressed against the canyon wall with Grim standing protectively in front of her. The massive Thraken had recognized the true danger immediately and positioned himself to guard the most vulnerable team member. His deep growls mixed defiance with fear as he watched the Night Reaper's calculated assault on their group. The predator seemed to understand exactly what it was doing. Rather than going for quick kills, it focused on separating and demoralizing the team. It would wound one member, then disappear before reappearing to strike at someone else. The psychological effect was devastating, as everyone realized they were facing something that could think and plan rather than just react on instinct. When the Night Reaper finally focused its attention on Grim, Maya felt her heart sink. The creature had identified the Thraken as the team's greatest asset and decided to eliminate him first. What followed was a battle between titans that shook the entire canyon as 800 pounds of loyal Guardian faced off against 1,200 pounds of pure predatory intelligence. Grim fought with desperate courage, but the Night Reaper had every advantage. It was larger, stronger, and fighting on familiar terrain, while Grim was trying to protect others rather than focusing solely on survival. The Thraken's loyalty became a weakness as he refused to abandon his position in front of Maya even when tactical retreat would have been smarter. The end came quickly and brutally. The Night Reaper feinted left, then struck right with claws that opened massive wounds across Grim's side and damaged his left rear leg. The Thraken's roar of pain and anger filled the canyon, but he remained standing until blood loss finally forced him to collapse beside the canyon wall. With their guide down and several team members wounded, Lieutenant Davis made the only decision that made tactical sense. He ordered an immediate retreat to the shuttle while the Night Reaper was momentarily distracted by its victory over Grim. The team had enough injured personnel to justify abandoning the mission, and no one argued with his assessment. Maya knelt beside Grim and felt tears streaming down her face as she saw the extent of his injuries. The massive wounds were bleeding heavily, and his damaged leg made standing impossible. Even if they could somehow stop the bleeding, there was no way an 800-pound creature could travel the 15 miles back to their shuttle through hostile terrain. "We have to take him with us," Maya said desperately as the team prepared to move out. "We cannot just leave him here to die." Korvac, who was still bleeding from his own encounter with the Night Reaper, shook his head dismissively. The beast is finished, he said without emotion. Carrying that much dead weight through predator territory is suicide. We barely have enough strength left to carry our own wounded. Even Tom, who had always been supportive, looked uncomfortable as he calculated the impossible logistics. Maya, I understand how you feel, but we need to be realistic. None of us can carry 800 pounds, and Grim cannot walk on that leg. We will all die if we try to bring him. Lieutenant Davis put a hand on Maya's shoulder with genuine sympathy. I am sorry, but we have to leave him. The Night Reaper is still out there, and more predators will be drawn by the scent of blood. We need to move now while we still can. Maya looked around at the faces of her teammates and saw the same expression on all of them. They genuinely regretted leaving Grim behind, but they all agreed it was impossible to save him. The mathematics were clear. 800 pounds of injured Thraken could not be moved by their reduced team through 15 miles of the galaxy's most dangerous terrain. I am not leaving him, Maya said quietly. You can go, but I am staying with Grim. The team stared at her in shock. Captain Rex tried to reason with her over the radio while Lieutenant Davis threatened to carry her out by force if necessary. They all saw her decision as emotional attachment overriding logical thinking. A small, weak human trying to save a creature 16 times her size was not just impossible but insane. Maya stood beside Grim's massive head and placed her small hand on his snout. The Thraken's breathing was labored, but his eyes still held intelligence and trust. He had protected her without hesitation, and now she would do the same for him regardless of what anyone else thought was possible. Go, Maya told the team firmly. I will find another way. As the team disappeared down the canyon, Maya was left alone with an 800-pound wounded creature on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. The logical part of her mind screamed that she had just signed both their death warrants, but her heart knew she could never live with herself if she abandoned someone who had risked everything to protect her. Maya knelt beside Grim's massive head and forced herself to think like a scientist rather than letting fear overwhelm her. The Thraken was badly injured but still alive and breathing. His wounds needed immediate attention, and somehow she had to figure out how to move 800 pounds of injured creature across 15 miles of hostile terrain. Everyone said it was impossible, but Maya refused to accept that word. Her first priority was stopping the bleeding from Grim's side. Maya used her field medical kit and torn pieces of her own clothing to create pressure bandages over the worst wounds. Her small hands were actually an advantage, as she could reach areas between his armor plates that larger fingers could not access. Grim remained still during her treatment, seeming to understand that she was trying to help him. While she worked, Maya's mind raced through everything she knew about Thraken physiology and the planet's environment. Grim's species had evolved on high-gravity worlds, which meant his bone density was incredible, and his muscle fibers were designed for maximum efficiency. If she could find a way to support his weight, his natural strength might be enough to help. With movement. Maya gathered pieces of wreckage from the team's scattered equipment and began constructing a makeshift sled. Her engineering knowledge was limited, but desperation made her creative. She used metal plates from damaged gear as runners and connected them with cables from broken communication devices. The result looked crude, but it might distribute Grim's weight enough to make movement possible. The real breakthrough came when Maya remembered her studies of ancient human cultures that had moved massive stone blocks without modern machinery. The secret was not brute force, but leverage and patience. She could not lift Grim, but she might be able to help him move himself. Using mechanical advantage and careful positioning, getting Grim onto the sled required every trick Maya could think of. She used fallen rocks as fulcrums and metal bars as levers to gradually shift his position. The process took hours and left her exhausted, but eventually the massive Thraken was positioned on her improvised transport. His injured leg was supported and secured, while his good legs could still provide some assistance with movement. Maya discovered plants growing in the canyon that her xenobiology training identified as natural painkillers. She prepared extracts using her field chemistry kit and administered them to Grim through cuts in his mouth lining. The medication helped reduce his pain and seemed to give him more energy for the journey. Ahead. The actual travel was a nightmare of endurance that pushed Maya beyond every limit she thought she had. The sled worked but required constant adjustment and repair as they moved across the rough terrain. Maya had to scout ahead to find the smoothest possible paths while constantly watching for predators. Drawn by the scent of blood, her small size became her greatest asset during the journey. While larger beings would have exhausted themselves trying to drag such massive weight, Maya could move efficiently in the dense atmosphere using minimal energy. She developed a rhythm of short movements followed by rest periods that allowed both her and Grim to recover strength. Maya shared her food rations with Grim, knowing that his recovery depended on proper nutrition. She went without meals herself rather than let the injured Thraken weaken further. Her own body began showing the strain as she lost weight and her hands became raw and bleeding from handling the rough equipment. But she never considered stopping. The nights were the worst part of their journey. Maya had to remain alert for predators, while Grim was too injured to provide much protection. She learned to read the sounds of the alien landscape and hide in places where larger creatures could not follow. Her knowledge of animal behavior helped her avoid confrontations rather than trying to fight battles she could never win. Grim gradually became more aware as his injuries began healing under Maya's careful treatment. The massive creature seemed amazed that this tiny human had refused to abandon him when everyone else saw him as expendable. He began helping however he could, using his remaining strength to assist with movement and his enhanced senses to detect approaching threats. Maya talked to Grim constantly during their journey, partly to keep herself focused, but also because she could see the intelligence in his eyes. She explained what she was doing and why, making decisions together rather than treating him as a patient. The bond between them deepened as they faced each challenge as a team. On the third day of their impossible journey, Maya's improvised sled finally broke beyond repair. She sat beside the wreckage and felt despair threatening to overwhelm her. They were still miles from the evacuation point, and Grim could not travel without mechanical assistance. For the first time since leaving the team, Maya allowed herself to consider that they might actually die out here, but Grim had other ideas. The massive Thraken struggled to his feet despite his injuries and positioned himself so Maya could climb onto his back. His damaged leg could not support full weight, but his other 3 legs might be enough for slow movement. He was offering to carry her just as she had been carrying him. Maya understood what Grim was proposing and felt tears streaming down her face. Even injured and exhausted, the loyal creature was still trying to protect her. She climbed carefully onto his back, and they began the final phase of their journey together. Grim's steps were painful and unsteady, but he refused to stop moving toward safety. They traveled through the last day and night without stopping. Maya used her body weight to help balance Grim's damaged gait while he pushed forward on determination. Alone, both of them were beyond exhaustion, but neither was willing to give up. When they had come so far together, the evacuation point appeared, just as Maya thought she might collapse from dehydration and fatigue. The rescue team that had been sent to recover their bodies found instead a small human and a massive alien who had accomplished something everyone said was impossible. Maya had carried Grim across 50 miles of hostile terrain, and he had carried her through the final stretch when her own strength failed. As the rescue shuttle approached, Maya slid down from Grim's back and collapsed beside her friend. They had both survived the impossible journey, but more importantly, they had proven that size and strength mattered less than determination and loyalty. The tiny human who everyone said was too weak for dangerous missions had just accomplished something that would become legend throughout the galaxy. The rescue team found Maya and Grim collapsed beside each other at the evacuation point, looking more dead than alive. Lieutenant Davis, who had led the search party, could barely believe what he was seeing. The small scientist they had written off as a casualty had somehow transported an 800-pound injured creature across 50 miles of the most dangerous terrain in the galaxy. Captain Rex arrived on the second shuttle and stood in stunned silence as his medical team worked to stabilize both the human and the Thraken. Maya was unconscious from exhaustion and dehydration, while her hands were torn and bleeding from days of handling rough equipment. She had lost nearly 20 pounds during the journey, and her body showed the incredible toll of her impossible rescue mission. The ship's doctor worked frantically to save Maya's life while veterinary specialists tended to Grimm's wounds. Both patients were in critical condition but alive, which was more than anyone had dared hope when they launched the rescue mission. The medical team had expected to recover bodies, not survivors who had somehow defied every law of physics and biology. As Maya recovered in the medical bay, the full scope of her achievement became clear to the crew. The rescue team had followed her trail across the hostile landscape and found evidence of ingenuity that bordered on genius. Her improvised equipment and creative solutions had turned an impossible task into merely the most difficult rescue in recorded galactic history. The ship's engineers studied the remains of Maya's sled and declared it a masterpiece of field improvisation. Using nothing but salvaged equipment and basic tools, she had created a transport system that distributed weight efficiently enough to move a creature 16 times her size. Her understanding of physics and biology had combined with desperate determination to achieve the impossible. When Grimm finally recovered enough to communicate the real story of their journey emerged. Using the ship's translation systems, the massive Thraken told his version of events to a gathering that included the entire crew and several remote observers from the Galactic Council. What they heard changed how every alien species would view humanity forever. Grimm described how Maya had stayed awake for days protecting him from predators when he was too weak to defend himself. She had given him her own food and water even when she was starving and dehydrated. Most remarkably, she had treated him not as an animal or piece of equipment but as a friend, whose life was worth any sacrifice she might have to make. The Thraken's testimony revealed details that Maya had never mentioned to anyone. During the worst night of their journey, when both of them nearly died from exposure, she had used her own body heat to keep him warm. When scavengers tried to feed on his wounds, she had fought them off with improvised weapons despite being a fraction of their size. Korvac the Brutani warrior who had mocked Maya so cruelly was forced to confront the true meaning of strength. In Brutani culture, the highest honor went to those who protected others at the cost of their own lives. Maya's actions represented everything his people valued most, and her small human frame had contained more courage than his 4 powerful arms. The proud warrior publicly requested permission to speak with Maya when she was strong enough. When she finally agreed to see him, Korvac knelt before her hospital bed and formally apologized for his blindness. In the Brutani language, he declared her worthy of the highest honors his people could bestow and asked to be considered her servant rather than her superior. Word of Maya's rescue spread throughout the galactic community faster than official reports could travel. The story of the tiny human who carried the wounded beast became legend among species that had never paid attention to Earth before. Suddenly, humanity was no longer seen as just another weak species, but as beings capable of impossible loyalty and determination. Maya woke up 3 days after the rescue to find her small medical room filled with flowers and gifts from alien species across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of worlds had sent tokens of respect for her achievement. The Thraken homeworld had declared her an honorary daughter of their people, while the Brutani Council voted to make her the first non-Brutani to receive their highest military decoration. When Maya was finally strong enough to walk, she found Grimm waiting for her in the ship's cargo bay. The massive creature had healed remarkably well thanks to her early treatment and was eager to see his rescuer. Their reunion brought tears to the eyes of hardened soldiers who watched the tiny human embrace the creature she had refused to abandon. Grimm made it clear through the translation systems that he wanted to remain with Maya as her permanent companion and research partner. His own people supported this decision, saying that the bond between them transcended species and represented the highest form of friendship their culture recognized. Maya accepted gladly, knowing that she had found not just a companion, but a family member. The mission to Korth 7 had failed in its original objectives but succeeded in something far more important. Maya's actions had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or aggression, but their refusal to abandon those who depended on them. The galaxy took notice and began viewing humans with new respect and even admiration. Captain Rex submitted a report that became required reading at every military academy in known space. The account of Maya's rescue demonstrated that traditional measures of strength and capability meant nothing compared to determination and loyalty. Officers across the galaxy learned that the smallest team member might prove to be the most valuable when everything went wrong. Maya returned to active duty as the most famous xenobiologist in galactic history. Her reputation opened doors that had been closed to humans, and her partnership with Grimm made them the most sought-after research team for dangerous missions. The woman who had once been mocked as too fragile for fieldwork now led expeditions to the most hostile worlds in known space. On their next mission, Maya and Grimm stood together on another alien world, watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Maya's hand rested on Grimm's massive shoulder as they planned their research strategy for the days ahead. Other species watched them with respect and wonder, understanding that they were seeing something special. Maya had learned that true strength came not from muscle or size, but from the courage to do what was right regardless of the cost. Her simple philosophy had spread throughout the galaxy, changing how entire civilizations thought about power and loyalty. When asked about her motivation, Maya always gave the same answer that had become humanity's unofficial motto among the stars. "We do not abandon family," she would say with quiet conviction. "Ever." It was a statement that resonated across species barriers, reminding everyone that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their aggression, but their unwavering commitment to those they chose to protect. In a galaxy full of predators and prey, humans had found their niche as the species that would never leave anyone behind.